Hey, this is Leighton from Just Collect, and I'm your host of Trading Card Therapy. I refer to myself as the doctor. It's all in good fun, of course. This is episode number 77, and my buddy Justin Silver, who has an incredible hockey card collection that you're going to want to stick around for, is waiting in the green room, and we're going to bring him on in just a few minutes. Wanted to cover a couple things very briefly. First, if you're going to be around the Philadelphia and King of Prussia area this weekend, please stop on by the Philly Show. You can get all the details for it at thephillyshow.com, but is a wonderful gathering of dealers and collectors and kids. There's going to be cards, there's going to be memorabilia, there's going to be autograph guests. There should be lots of fun giveaways from companies like eBay. So if you're in the area, come on by, say hi, check it out. I'm going to be there with my son, so I'd love to meet all of you, and I'm sure he would too. Next topic I'd like to cover very briefly is that Vintage Breaks, our breaking company with over 100 breaks on our site, including over 20 vintage set breaks. You can find it all at vintagebreaks.com. We have our big event ending next Sunday night, the 29th of September at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to give away thousands of dollars in vintage cards and break credit and other fun prizes that day. It concludes at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find all the details on our website at vintagebreaks.com. But if you prefer just to go to the YouTube stream, where we are 7 days a week live on YouTube, you can find us at youtube.com/vintagebreaks. So the only other thing I want to cover, other than what I just shared before we bring on Justin, is this is just a reminder. Last week, my really good buddy Larry, who has an amazing vintage unopened collection, was kind enough to join us. So for the next several months, I hope that you'll join me here as the host of Trading Card Therapy as I bring on hobby guests from all walks of life: collectors, dealers, auction house owners, customers, just regular average Joe collectors, and everyone and anyone in between. So I hope you'll join me. It's going to be a lot of fun. Justin is our second guest in this series, and it should take us all the way to episode 100. So thanks so much for tuning in today, and I think you're going to enjoy as we bring on Justin in just a minute. Last piece I wanted to cover is just a few, I would say, probably months ago, maybe a little bit longer. I did an episode called Thinning the Herd, and it was on Trading Card Therapy. And I talked about, in large part, the idea of how most of us, whether it be collectors or dealers, have typically way more cards than we need at any one point. And so I find myself, especially with all the chaos going in the world, whether it be financial, whether it be with the election or other. And of course, the Fed did just drop rates substantially. So it has a lot of people kind of up in arms thinking that things are going to be either really good or really bad. Who knows exactly what the case is. But regardless, I was looking at my eBay store just before today's episode. I have over 1,000 cards. And so I was telling John Paul Maris, our vice president, he's affectionately known as J5 to the Vintage Breaks community, that, what would I be as a good leader, right? As a good businessman, as a good teammate, if I couldn't take my own advice that I think is sound? So I looked at the store, and of course I have tens of thousands of cards well beyond that. These are just cards that are already priced out and available for sale at fixed price on eBay. And in that store alone of over 1,000 graded cards, I have over 100 1933 Gaudis. And I know there's a lot of people working on the Gaudi set. I figured that it's a pretty robust market and that the auction process will help determine what a lot of these commons that I have that are graded 4s, 5s, and 6s, maybe even a couple 7s are worth. And I'm going to take some money off the table. So whether it be you're heading to a card show, whether it be you're heading into the holiday season, or you're looking to plan your next big vacation for yourself or your significant other or your family, or really anything and everything in between, let's be smart and thin our own herd, take our own advice here at Trading Card Therapy, and try to get rid of some of the things that maybe don't exactly have a place in our collection the way it stands, at least right at this moment. So with that, I'm going to bring in Justin Silver, who has an incredible vintage hockey collection. Hey, Justin, how are you?
Good, Leighton. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I see you're doing it at the home office.
I'm doing it at the home office, exactly.
Very nice. Well, I've got to know you pretty well over the last several years, but for those in our audience that may not know you, if you could maybe give a little bit of a quick background on kind of who you are, what you do, maybe where you come from, and that kind of good stuff.
Yep. So nice to meet everybody. I live in New Jersey, not too far away from Leighton. We hang out a lot, play tennis together, Sometimes I win, sometimes he wins. We're probably about 500 right now in all the matches. But I work in private equity. I specialize in mergers and acquisitions, and spend most of my time in the healthcare technology area. When I'm not doing that, I'm building my collection and hunting for cards and hanging in the community and meeting new friends and constantly learning.
Very cool. And, hopefully one of these days our kids will get together again and they'll teach my son a little bit more about collecting, because he's definitely catching the bug, but it's for one-piece cards. But I'm still happy.
Yeah, I have my older son's very big into Pokemon, and my younger son just likes to open packs. Could be anything.
Very cool.
He has no idea what he's doing.
That's right. I don't think many of us do either, but we try to just dress the part.
He has fun, which is most important thing.
Very cool. I know you mentioned just a minute ago that, when you're not working and being a family man and fitting in some tennis, right? Some time for R&R. I know you take collecting very seriously, but in the way that serious, I mean passion. Like, you love it. And so I wanted to start off so we can paint a picture for everyone. How long have you actually collected for?
Well, I definitely was big into collecting when I was a kid, and I would do it with my mom, actually. She was big into it with me. She actually had a wholesale license and through her business. So we would go down to candy wholesalers and buy boxes and boxes of cards. And her rule was always, you can open half and you got to put half away, which I think was pretty smart at the time. And so, a lot of this was in the 80s. And we put half away. And unfortunately, in 1992, my grandfather passed away, and my mom had to join the family business in New York. And we moved. So all the unopened boxes went into, moving boxes. And we never revisited it for a long time. They sat in my basement of my parents' house kind of as a time capsule. It wasn't until about maybe like 6 years ago or so, I went back and opened them up, and it was incredible. And there's a lot of really cool stuff there. But that's around the time, maybe 6-7 years ago, when I got back into it. And when I was a kid, I was I really focused mostly on hockey. I played ice hockey growing up. I loved, I'm a big Boston Bruins fan. I was always, I grew up in Washington, D.C., but the first book I checked out of the first grade library was a kid's book on Bobby Orr. And I was hooked. I mean, the flying goal, and I loved hockey, and, was the kid in Washington, D.C. who didn't like the home team. And, because of that, I collected cards, and a lot of Bobby Orr cards back then. I wish I had bought some nicer ones, but so do we all. And that's really what I focused on. And so when I picked it back up, that's naturally what I focused on too, because I was passionate about it when I was younger, and just have always loved the sport and really the history of the sport too. Especially in vintage, you have an opportunity when you collect vintage to really understand the history of the sport and who some of these players were who you've never seen, but maybe have read about. And I enjoy that.
I enjoy that immensely as well. And I just started reading the book. I think it's called The Glory of Their Times. It's mainly about baseball, nothing to do with hockey, but it's about yesteryear. And for those that are familiar with the book, someone recommended it to me from the Vintage Breaks community. It's tremendous. And I think that's what my son, and certainly I've started to put together, it seems like you as well, Justin, that in many cases, you're reading about someone who almost seems like a Paul Bunyan type character. Like, was he real? Was Babe Ruth actually real? And I know there's photos, right? And there's audio and there's video, not a lot, but there's some. But when you hold, and I'm not saying it's the same card for everyone. That's not what I'm suggesting. But man, I just know for me, because I started when I was a young kid also, that when you started that journey, Justin, there's something about holding that piece of history in your hands and realizing that it not only is all real, it was probably better than you can even remotely imagine. And so I think we both probably feel similar.
Yeah, and when I get some of these cards, I think to myself, like, what has been the journey of this card over decades? You know, who's held it? You know, what pack was it opened out of? And it's just it's pretty amazing, especially and I do mostly high grade stuff. Just how these things maintain their condition, and you know, I wish they could talk back and tell the stories of where they've been and who's held them and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a passion.
Absolutely. So I know you're talking about a couple things that you enjoy about the hobby, but I want to, really try to boil it down to maybe like one or two. That, in other words, when, I know a little bit about you and your background, and of course, I knew all these things before today's interview, but I want to make sure that the audience gets to know you. So when you're doing all of your daily stuff, right, and you're getting to the end of the day and you have no more energy for tennis, and maybe your wife is sleeping and the kids have somehow already fallen asleep too, and you have the opportunity to get to your computer versus your collection, because there's a difference, right? Sometimes we know that when we get to our collection, it's really fun, but there's not going to be an acquisition happening. And I know a lot of us, we have that same itch that when we go to that electronic piece of equipment, whether it be our phone or the computer, you're literally like a click away, like a heartbeat away from getting something new. Hey, what can I text my buddy Leighton about? What can I text my buddy Justin about?
Right.
So I'm curious, and this wasn't on my list of questions, but it came to me because I know you pretty well. I feel like it's going to be interesting to get to know you even better right now for the audience. How does your rabbit hole start? In other words, you have some piece. Do you tend to go and be the person who's like, you know what? Let me organize. Let me look at some stuff. Or do you tend to go to that computer or your phone because, hey, I want to go to auctionreport.com, right? Nice little plug for my buddy Ryan. It's a great place to check out all the auctions going on. Or if you're an eBay guy, listen, I just want to look up, is there any cool new Bobby Orr cards listed on eBay? And obviously you can get notifications for that. But I don't want to keep going on and on. I'm curious what you do and how you get there. Does it change? In other words, if it's on Tuesday, you do this, but on Thursdays, you're like, no, I'm busting out a beer and I'm going to, thanks for laughing. I'm curious, Justin, let us know your thoughts.
So I would say it's kind of just an ongoing thing. It's not like I just open it up after the kids go to bed. So, I guess we're talking about my acquisition strategy for certain things.
Sure.
And I would say, I have, I look at every auction that comes up and I try to be one of the first ones to look through it. Don't always bid, but bookmark. I have a bunch of eBay alerts that I set for things that are on my want list. So, every morning I wake up, I generally check that. I participate in Facebook groups and have an Instagram account, Stuck on Pucks, if anyone wants to follow me. So I kind of always have those things going on in the background. But really, I try to have a number of opportunities or deals, if you would, that are kind of ongoing at one time. And in my line of full-time work, this is what I kind of do on a much bigger scale. I look for companies and try to convince them to sell themselves to either my firm or another company that we own. And, we may only get a couple things done a year. And I find that, in the hobby, when I'm constantly using my brain to analyze and to negotiate, and it may sound funny, but it kind of keeps me sharp in my full-time job when the time comes to have to negotiate with a company or, think about how I might approach someone to sell something. So it does kind of tie back to my full-time job. And again, it keeps me fresh and keeps my mind working.
Really appreciate you laying it out there the way that you just did, because oftentimes I feel as we, glide through life, we're doing it unconsciously. And I think you bring, at least to me, some things that people aren't considering when it comes to the hobby. And I talked about it actually last week on Trading Card Therapy. Some of the things I see that even though my son doesn't exactly love sports yet, it isn't collecting all the things that I love, man, Justin, I'm seeing the things he's learning.
Oh,
Has nothing to do with the hobby.
Yeah,
he knows how to shake your hand. He knows how to look you in the eye, and he knows how to say please and thank you. He knows how to be respectful when we go to someone's booth, even if it's not for cards. We're looking at one-piece Funko Pops. He's very respectful. And like, I didn't teach him every last thing, but he's developing it from being in the space. And so I'm hearing, and obviously, Justin, we've joked kind of off air, but I'm going to say it on air too. You would make a great card dealer slash, and that's why you and I become such good friends, because we have the same passion. And can you imagine that I do all the things that you're suggesting, but I also, I collect as well, but I do it professionally. It could be all engrossing and candidly overwhelming, at times. And so I was going to ask you kind of that next question. How are you able to separate church and state, and church and state in this case being the rest of your life and collecting? Because candidly, and I wrote down here a couple of things, but one of them is not just in tennis, but in collecting, that you're very competitive. And I think sometimes we don't talk about that in collecting enough, kind of like similar to the way I buy and sell collections. In other words, Justin, people are like, oh, Leighton, you just got another one. And people think it falls from the ceiling. Like you just wake up one day and you get hit in the head with a 52 tops lead. It doesn't work like that. And I know you're laughing because you know that the flip side is also true. In other words, I know that you're not just like waking up and in the morning, Bobby Orr collections are like just knocking you over. You don't know what to do with yourself. I mean, you have a commitment to the process. You enjoy it, which obviously makes it a little bit easier. And even just some of those things you touched upon, for those that are listening, to be a collector, it's okay, whatever your definition is. So we're not suggesting that you have to be super serious and passionate. I just want to point out, though, because some of the cards you're going to show off in a little bit, Justin, I'll be the first to say it. I know they're worth a lot of money. But just like in our professional lives, you didn't just get them by going out, writing a check, and like you saw one, you're like, hey, that's pretty cool. And you text me after. I mean, we could have just an episode on all of our texts over the last several years of late. I'm going to look at this card or this collection. What do you think? Can you do me a favor? Can you look it over? Because you care so much, not just about the financial aspect of it. You want to procure as wonderful and as an extensive collection as you possibly can because you love hockey.
Right. I would say that, yes, I definitely, part of it is competition and it is rewarding to win. But the other part, there are a lot of collectors out there that are looking to just always get top dollar or suck people dry. And there's a community aspect to it too. And I've made some great friends. I joke with my wife and I tell her, if something happens in the US and we need to flee the country, I have like a million friends in Canada that she's never met and probably never will met, but we'll be okay. We could go anywhere in Canada and I think I have a friend up there. I think, part of it is community. Kind of the tenets that I have, and principles I have in deal making and, on a much larger scale kind of ring true. So when I look to negotiate a deal in cards, I'm like very analytical, and I always, have a perspective on value that I share with the seller. And I think it's important to have a view on value and be able to back it up with logic. And I think some people appreciate that. Other people don't really understand what I'm talking about. But for the most part, I think it helps create, deals with a lot less friction. And those are the ones that I think can build more enduring relationships and help with reputation too. So that's important to me. And then, you were talking before about, lessons that kids can learn. I mean, I take my son to shows all the time. Sometimes he works at friends' tables, and I mean, there is no better way to teach a kid about business than getting them involved in this hobby. I mean, you know, just core principles like buy low, sell high, or be patient, be willing to walk away, be
Help
nice
your neighbor.
be
Exactly.
nice to people. I remember I went to the Toronto show last year, and I brought a graded ticket. It was Charlie McAvoy, a defenseman on the Bruins. Charlie McAvoy, it was his debut, and my son was with me, and I went up to a friend's table the dealer was a Bruins fan, and I said, "Here you go. Here's a gift for me." And my son was like, "How much is that worth? Why did you just give it to him?" And I'm like, I'm not expecting anything in return, but like if you treat people nicely and you do nice things and you're kind, then usually that finds its way back to you somehow. Maybe not from the guy I gave the ticket to, but if you're nice to people and you're a good person, And so these are things that I think are that I apply in business, that I apply to the hobby, and that I'm trying to teach my son too.
Listen, I think it's great. I bought some cards from your son. I remember in the last Toronto show, it was a lot of fun. The mistake I made was that I made the decision early to buy it, because then every time I came back to the booth, he was just hitting me up again as if I was a new customer. He didn't care that I'd already spent money. He's like, "Yeah, what you got?"
Yeah, he's a wheeler and dealer, that's for sure.
Listen, I respect. So I want to pull out one of the points that you brought up there, because I was actually going to cover it in a future episode. And I think that at least with the upcoming Philly show this weekend, which I know you're heartbroken you can't make, but we'll put out some cards for you. We'll see if we can do some business together. I think it could help not just sellers of cards, but really like the whole ecosystem. And so I was considering that, when we go to a show, of course, and set up an exhibit, if you will, at a convention like we're going to do this weekend, we're booth 210 and 212. I would say almost all, if not all of our cards will be priced. The only cards that realistically will not be priced will be cards that just came in. And we'll tell people this came in from a special collection. We want to put it on display. The future story in the video will be on our blog at blog.justcollect.com, and kind of like all that good stuff. And so on the flip side, we were just discussing it earlier this morning when we were talking about topics for future episodes. And so you bring up this notion of where you like to start with other folks, because some people you deal with, Justin, they might be collectors. Other people might be dealers. You never know. And to be fair, it doesn't really matter. It should be respectful nonetheless. And so what I found that I love that you said, because I do this when I handle buying for Just Collect. Doesn't mean that every other person does it the same way, but I know for me, it creates a lot less friction and a lot more confidence and trust. And even if there's a comp or a card or two that we're off on, it's easy enough to remove them from the transaction, as opposed to kind of butt heads and everything. And so I would love to see kind of, this situation where other folks, collectors or investors, let's say, for example, just this weekend, they come to the show. If you're going to bring 10 cards or a dozen cards, instead of bringing them and just knowing what you want to sell them for, I would consider also being able to tell that dealer, or to be fair, Justin's a collector. You could sell to Justin at the show if he was there, what you think the cards are worth. Because what happens, we were talking about how to also succeed for Just Collect this weekend. If someone brings us a group of graded cards, unless it's like just very vanilla, everything super duper commoditized, I'm still going to check the prices. But if you said to me, "Hey, Leighton," especially Justin, I know you very well. I just did the research 48 hours ago. I use Card Ladder, VCP, eBay Completed Auctions. These are my comps. This is what I think they're worth. This is what I think I would sell them for. I'll tell you, I would be much more inclined to just say, "You know what, Justin? Time is of the essence here at the show. I don't have a ton of it. The numbers seem to be okay. If they're not, do you mind if I contact you back if we differed on something?" And we know each other very well. We'd have no problem with that. I know others may not be in that situation. But look what happens right now. Imagine we didn't know each other. Well, if you come up to someone's booth with a group of 10 graded cards, and on top of the price that you want, which that's easy to figure out because everyone always knows what they want, but they don't always do the extra work, which is share part of the process, which is, what do you think the cards are actually worth? And even if you might be embarrassed, well, I think two things will happen. Number one, you'll kind of catch yourself. Maybe you'll adjust your pricing. And if not, maybe you'll actually have proof in your own mind as to why you think the pricing's sincere. And I'll tell you, just the way that Justin shared a few minutes ago, I love learning about the hobby. So if someone comes to me at the show and we go over 10 cards and I'm like, hey, the comp on this T206, which by the way, this is not an easy card to get, Roger Bresnahan Hindu that I came up with at 1,500, I think it's worth 2,000 or 1,000, but this is why. Even if we don't agree, I might learn a different way to comp my own cards in the future. And I love that. So absolutely, not just to foster conversation, but candidly to get some oil on that wheel. And I do think that if every person who was going into the National or who's going into a trade night, on top of knowing what they wanted, was also willing to share what they thought they were worth, Justin, that's really the secret to my success as far as when I deal with folks who are maybe in the hobby, but they don't do it every day the way that you and I do it. I'll present to them a spreadsheet, whether it be it's a Google sheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and I won't do every card, but I'll present to them to the best of their collection. So that way we can go through on an itemized basis and let them know what we think the cards are worth and ultimately what we would pay for them. And in this case, of course, you're just on the sell side. And I think that that's awesome if you can get people to do that. I'm not sure how to do that, but I think it's a great recommendation. Yeah.
Well, it also creates trust in a transaction. And oftentimes you've never really met the person you're working with on the other side. And people tend to have their guards up sometimes. And so just being transparent, I think, and logical creates trust and improves your chances of getting something done.
Absolutely. I feel like we could go on forever, but before we do, let's kind of tease folks and show off just a couple cards so far, and then we'll show off a few more later. As you show off some of your favorites, I know that you've kind of shared the story as to how you got your start with hockey, but how did you take that start from hockey and collecting? Because as you're going to show off some of these beauties, how did you get to the level of the comfortability to be able to say, forget about having the financial means, that's different. To say, you know what, I'm comfortable buying a card for, thousands of dollars or 5 figures or more. But please show off some of your favorites that you have sitting around that I know you were kind enough to pull out today.
Sure. Okay, so this is perhaps my favorite. This is a 51 Howe rookie PSA 8. I actually have 2 of them.
All right, we got to know, how come you have 2? That's crazy.
So, the first one, this one, I got a number of years ago. It's just perfect. I mean, it's perfectly centered, and it's the best 8 I've seen. So that I had to have. And then the second one, I bought a collection from a really nice guy in Boston. He had one of the top PSA registry sets for the 500 goal scorers and 1,000-point scorers in the NHL, and it was a good price that I got, but it was a you got to take everything price. Sure. So there were a lot of doubles that I had in that I've since sold, but I have the second Howe. I haven't sold that yet, and trying to figure out what to do with it. Do I give one to each of my kids one day, or do I sell it? So that's why I have 2.
Very cool. Well, Justin, if you're unsure between both of them, we could start the adoption process, and you can take me on, and I'd be happy to take.
Yeah, this is another Gordie Howe. This is the 54 tops and a PSA 8. A lot of people argue that this is his rookie. It's like kind of a debate between people. Is it the 51 Parkey? Is it the 54 tops? This is the first kind of, regular size card. I mean, I think the 51 is absolutely his rookie, but this is just, it's such an iconic card of Gordie Howe.
It's beautiful. And Justin, I'm glad you brought it up, because I don't think you can argue it's his rookie, meaning the 54 tops. Of course, it is his first tops card, and for a lot of people that matters. But I wanted to ask you, value aside, which one is better looking to you?
I well, it's like, which kid do you think is better looking? I don't know. To me, it's the 51 Parky. Like when I was a kid, like not just like, aesthetically, there's a difference, but which one's better looking for not just aesthetics. I mean, those 51 cards when I was a kid, it was like, one day I'm going to be able to get some of those. And
that's so cool that you've been able to do that. Of course, times a couple there. I can really appreciate that, because for me, it wasn't a Gordie Howe, but I understand what you mean as a collector. It's really ingrained in you at a very young age. And I think that's awesome. I fall on the other side of the fence. That's because I'm just looking at it purely from, if you will, like an artistic aesthetic perspective. And I just feel like with the color, the card being larger, I've seen original art before for the 54 Topps hockey set. I'm not arguing that it's a better card. I'm not arguing that it's his rookie. But if you had to say to me they're of equal value and I could choose one or the other, I love the 54 Topps. But I will tell you, if you've never laid your eyes on it, and I'm sure you have, Justin, the wrappers for 1951 Parkhurst hockey, those are a trip.
Those are cool. I mean, I guess if you told me like you could either blow up the 51 Parky or the 54 Topps and have a picture hanging in your house, I would absolutely go with the 54 Topps.
Okay, sure.
It's much more aesthetically pleasing.
Speaking of blowing up cards like that, I wonder if our buddy Tim Carroll, who produces original card art from like common cards, this is the way he operates. He only will do a card once. So I almost bought the Garbage Pail Kids Atom Bomb from him, and then he sold it, and he won't do another.
Oh, wow.
And they look amazing. So
what's this guy's name?
Tim Carroll. Check him out. He's an amazing card artist. And I'm curious if he ever did the Howe. I think he's done a Gretzky, but if he's not done a Howe, you should consider doing the 54 Topps. It would be amazing with those colors.
So everything is a one of one.
Everything's a one of one, but it'll blow your mind. It's so fun to look at. Just Google him, and for anyone who's listening and watching the show, it's worth checking out, even if you never buy one, because they're pricey. You know, if I had to guess, if you buy one direct from him, by the way, his wait list used to be like a year, maybe 2. I heard it's about 6 years now.
Oh, wow.
You know, he's not farming it out to anyone.
Right,
he's just doing it himself. But how amazing is that success story? Is that he started off just doing it as a passion, and now he does it full time, and he's got a very long waiting list.
That's very cool. I love it.
Yeah, really cool.
All right, what's next? What do we see next?
I know what cards you have there because we corresponded before. Talk to me about the 1966 Topps Bobby Orr rookie and the test set, in that pretend I don't know anything about it, so that the audience can learn a little bit about the Topps issue. Because let's be clear, if they never made a Topps test issue, the 66 Topps Bobby Orr is really tough to find. It's not an easy card. They didn't make a lot of them. But I'd love to hear from a true vintage hockey enthusiast, not only see these examples up close and personal, but maybe we could teach our audience something today.
Yeah, so 1966 Topps Test was a 66 card set that was produced in the United States. Lighter color to the cards. A lot of them have kind of this white line on some of the edges, and they were just less produced, and they were test runs. So people, I don't know that they kept them. The regular top set was produced in Canada, and I think it might be like a 132 card set, somewhere along those lines. And there were more of them produced, and more people collected them. So the test set became like, it's just very rare. And so I have actually 2 full sets, PSA graded, of the test set, just because I've upgraded over time and bought some. And, so I have 2, you want me to show the cards?
Please.
So I have, this is the 66 Topps in a PSA 8. Oops, go like that.
That's awesome.
And then this is the test in a PSA 8. So you can see
a little lighter the color, the way you described.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like not getting this camera right.
No, you got it. That's great.
So yeah, that's the test. So with the regular tops 8, there's 47 tops 8s with 2 higher,
Wow.
whereas with the test there's 9 8s with 10 higher. So if you look at the 8 plus, there's a little bit less than 20 on the test, where there's about 50 on the regular tops.
Oh my goodness. I feel like we could do a whole episode on this, on the Vintage Spotlight. Maybe we'll cover this in the future. For those that don't know, there's another podcast I started a couple months ago with Jeremy Lee. He's the host of Sports Card Live every Saturday night, but we spun off the Vintage Spotlight, which is every Saturday night at 10:30 for a few minutes with Jeremy. We spun off our own show, and we usually highlight a set every week. And if we ever do a hockey episode, and I'm sure we will, I think the tops test issue would be a wonderful one to explore. I have so many questions, but I'll try to limit it so that I don't keep you all day.
Sure.
I guess my first question is, did the tops issue come out first in Canada and then they wanted to see how it would perform in the US, or was it vice versa?
I think it was vice versa.
Interesting.
I think it came out in the US first and then Canada.
So tops test issue was issued in the US. Do you think that gave them the data and the impetus behind releasing tops in Canada?
I mean, I don't know, quite frankly. I mean, it's
not
like
that's what I want to know. We should ask our buddy Bobby Burrell. He's a huge hockey enthusiast.
That's who he would absolutely know. I mean, it's not like 66 was the first year tops did hockey, No,
what I'm saying, I bet you someone knows. I agree with you, Justin. I would love to know definitively, but if what you're saying is true, let's assume for a second that it is possible that they tested it first in the US and then they rolled it out in Canada. What I also want to mention, and I don't have a wrapper from the issue. I'm sure they're very difficult to find, but it's not as if tops, when they issue these cards, Justin, they say tops test issue on them. So that's why my question is, did they issue this in the US first? I can make an argument they didn't, and hear this out for a second, and this is all off the cuff. What if they produced the issue as a test, and maybe it was like, afterwards, and it was for the US or vice versa? In other words, the reason why it's not 132 cards is because there wasn't enough demand. Like, why would they only produce 66?
Yeah, I mean, that's a logical theory, I would say.
I think it's possible. Love to know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know, like on the backs, it says, you can see on that one, it says printed in the US on the bottom.
Sure.
And then on the regular tops, it says printed in Canada on the bottom.
Which is so cool because they're still tops cards.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with each of them, there's really, within each set, there's really one card that you are looking for. It's not a set that is like chock full of rookies. It's really the ore card. That's the holy grail there. Although in the test set, there's such low pops at high grade. Some of the commons go for thousands of dollars, which may not be that big of a deal for people that collect like baseball and football, but
sure,
for hockey, it's a pretty it can be a pretty pricey set for even just the high grade commons.
Sure. I'm curious if you have any insight as to, so you said on the ore tops, there's 47, but there's only 2 higher. And on the test, there was, I think, 10 8s with 9 higher, or vice versa. So it seems as though, because clearly there's probably not as many test issue ores out there, is this the right assumption that it's a little bit easier to find the Bobby Orr test issue in higher grade than the tops? And if that's the case, why is that?
That's a great question too. So that is true. Recently, I think that there was a big collection that was found, from what I hear, from somebody who opened boxes and packs in the 60s or whatever, and kept all of the cards very, protected them. And it was recently all graded. And so a lot of high grade test cards have recently hit the market. And you've seen a lot of them in like the golden auctions, in Heritage, Probstein has sold a lot of them. So, because of that, I think the populations on certain cards have gone up a lot. It's kind of interesting. It's almost like, I don't know how the sheets were, if it was one sheet or multiple sheets, but it's only, not every card in that set kind of was found in high grade in this collection.
So it's interesting. So something's going on, but see, to me, that's what's super fun about treasure card hunting.
Right.
Right.
Oh, that's
because
fine.
It's not just finding the stuff, the stories intrigue me. Yes. Now, of course, I'm going to do a deep dive. I have Bobby Burrell selling my phone. I'm probably going to text him afterwards. Yeah. I want to know the background. We'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. And I mean, he has the, for any big hockey collector, I think I have it back here. Usually just have it sitting on my desk. Yeah. Like this is,
it's the Bible.
This is the Bible. Yeah. This is Bobby's
Bible,
book.
Baby.
So actually, it probably says in here, 1966, he might have the answer. The test issue of 66 cards was the first official hockey release issued exclusively by Topps for the USA market. Blah, 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 blah. Canadians also have French on the text. So there's no French on the USA test. The wrapper was actually a cello wrapper. And so it wasn't
on the test?
Yeah, it wasn't a wax wrapper.
Wow. You think there's any of those packs still out there?
Oh my God. I mean, that would be the dream.
Oh my goodness. I would love to open a 66 Topps hockey test issue cello pack.
Yeah. It says actually, we feel that this issue was released later than anticipated by Topps due to the overwhelming popularity of Bobby Orr joining the NHL and the league doubling in size.
Huh.
So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear what Bobby has to say. He probably knows way more than just what that.
Yeah, well, I plan to invite Bobby on, so you'll have to tune into that one. That'll be a good episode.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Justin, I know that you're a very passionate collector, certainly successful one at that, as well as your day job. And I'm curious, as you've combined the two, I know you've utilized kind of some of your skills from the hobby to help your day job and vice versa. So based on what you've seen and what you've learned for the last few years upon coming back to the space, what is one or two things that you think that you'd like to either see an improvement on or an innovation that would help foster either growth or ease of transactions or transparency, something positive? Curious your thoughts.
I'd love to see more people join the PSA registry. So, and maybe it doesn't need to be the PSA registry, but I found that it's been a great way to like communicate and meet other collectors. And you can find people that have exact similar interests as you. So it's almost like it's already been called to, for you to be able to reach out to people that are collecting the same things as you. So I'd say maybe just globally more organization amongst collectors, so that it's easier for people to get to know each other and transact. And so that would be one. And then you said earlier, I think at the beginning, it's very easy to buy cards. Like I can press a button and I can buy a card.
Yes.
Selling them can be challenging. The liquidity can be challenging. And I'd love to see innovation around the industry where liquidity was easier and less with less friction. And my sense is that, a lot of the big companies out there, whether it be eBay or, collectors or some of the other, fanatics, whatever, they're probably thinking about that because it's a big opportunity. So I'd like to see that.
I agree with both of your points. I would say that as far as the second one, I think that even with better innovation, with an increased investment in the space and let's say additional solutions, I don't believe there's one size solution that fits for everybody. And I think
Right.
that's because humans are inherently, we're vastly different across cultures, across sexes. And so I do feel, though, similar to you in that I would just like things to be easier. So, for example, we've alluded to this in today's episode just a little bit earlier, how the way that Just Collect approaches the appraisal process and the buying process, even though we don't do it for every card, we tell people the line item, the cards that are worthwhile, we will literally tell them what we think they're worth and then what we will pay. You might say, well, literally? No, because a lot of people just offer what they'll pay, but they won't educate them about what they think it's worth. Part of the problem, Justin, with doing that for every single transaction, for every card, is it's beyond laborious. It's not efficient, even with Card Ladder and VCP. And so I try to explain that to people. And so, you know, if there comes a day, and of course this is on the lower end of things, I think Check Out My Cards is a great solution for this, and they're not a sponsor of the show, but I use them. There's got to be a place that's easier for us to dispose of our cards that are 50 cents to $100, to just turn that stuff into money, because most of the time I believe that we would just put that money back into the space. But you know, our arteries get clogged. We have tons of inventory. I'm thinning my own herd by selling, 100 or so 33 Gaudy Commons that I certainly don't need. And so I'm curious for yourself as we try to, wrap up sooner rather than later, even though I have no schedule that I have to do that. I just don't want to keep you forever. Do you have a process where you're like, oh my God, the stacks are getting too high in my desk? Or I think that if my wife happens to ask me this month what I've purchased, I might be better off being proactive so I can tell her, I've sold some cards recently.
Right.
Thanks for laughing. I'm curious how you approach, any or all of that.
Well, I tend to not like to hold inventory for that long. I know other collectors that, are fine kind of having as much inventory as possible because you can use it for trade or whatnot. I like the cash flow to continue to kind of work. And so if you're holding inventory, it's hard to do that. For my general process is for something that's of reasonable value and worth my time, I'll usually always post in Facebook groups to see if there's some interested buyers initially. And then if there's not, then I will, I'll consign them to like a Probstein or others and just kind of move them. Might take a loss on some of them. I won't do it for the super duper high value ones, but for things that are like, a certain amount or less, it's just let's go. And sometimes, you do well, sometimes you don't, but at least you're moving them on and you can repurpose the cash for other things. So that's generally my philosophy.
I like it. I appreciate you sharing that.
Just one thing that we didn't discuss that I'm just so intrigued by in the hobby is the modern versus vintage question. And so back to like what I would love to see happen, I would love to see more modern collectors move into vintage. And I hope that one day they eventually will. The market for modern, I would say, in terms of the number of people that are in it, far surpasses the people that are in vintage. But I worry about the modern collectors because, a lot of these players are going to wind up being nobodies. And I worry that people will leave the hobby, whereas, on the vintage side, there's a lot more downside protection and a lot more scarcity and a lot more opportunity for people to kind of be involved on for a longer duration. Not to say that I don't play around with modern at times. I do. In fact, the Cup released yesterday, which is like very exciting. It's the best hockey product, and plan to open some of that. But it's a topic that I am like constantly focused on in terms of how to get more people into the vintage market. What's going to happen to modern collectors? what's going to happen to the value of all these modern cards? To me, it's got to be one of the biggest questions in the hobby, perhaps that nobody wants to think about or address. But
I mean, I think it's a great set of points, Justin, and I would start with education. Meaning, listen, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't want to pretend to be one. But I think that facts are facts, right? And so the reality of it is maybe some of the folks that are participating in the modern don't actually understand that they're going to go like a yo-yo. Even though you and I know that, maybe they don't. So, maybe it's on whether it be organizations like Sports Card Investor or more so the grading companies to put out education so that people can decide with a little bit more intelligence the route that they want to take. But at the end of the day, you're not going to stop people from doing what they ultimately want to do. And let's be clear, this really is a space that first and foremost should be fun. And so for a lot of folks, it doesn't really matter what their collection's worth, either now or really ever. And I think sometimes that's lost because I know, listen, you and I both have very nice collections, but yet we both appreciate sometimes, the more inexpensive items just as much as we do the better items.
Oh, yeah. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, I have some like $50 cards that I treasure.
Hey, listen, you're texting me about your fish tickets and like, is there a market for them? And, so yeah, listen, we both love what we love. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you just a couple more questions, and then we're going to finish off by showing a few more cards. So number one is, I just returned to the Toronto show earlier this year. And I mean, I love the show, but I hadn't been going for the last few years. And of course, I have my own thoughts, but seeing as how you go all the time, and I saw you up there, Justin, like you're entrenched. You're almost like the Bobby Orr mayor, right? For those that don't know the convention, just for basically for folks that don't know about it, let's tell them why they should at least entertain the notion of going to the Toronto Expo, which is only twice a year.
Yeah. So for me as a hockey collector, when I go to the National or Philly or, some of the other, there's a bunch of like local New York, like the Westchester show. I'm searching for like needles in haystacks with hockey. It's hard. I mean, it takes a lot of time. There's not much there. In Toronto, it's the opposite. It's probably like 85% hockey. Every table is, primarily hockey cards, and I'm like a kid in a candy store. So I love it for that reason. And you can find modern, you can find vintage. I even love, I like to drive now. I love the oddball stuff. Like it's almost like there's a bunch of like garage sale type stuff with just hockey memorabilia and old stuff. And sometimes I'll pick some of that up, which these are things that you'll never find in the US based shows. It's crowded, but it's not overcrowded. The athletes and guests that they have are like, some of the best hockey players of all time. So that's pretty neat. You get to go to like another country, which is so cool. It may be just Canada, but you're in another country, which is always.
Listen, I'm going to downtown Toronto next time. I agree with everything you said, plus a couple things. So just purely from the hockey card perspective, I mean, when I go to Philly this weekend, there might be like, I'll count the amount of hockey vintage sets from the 60s and earlier on one hand.
Yeah.
They'll be that easily at Len Potty's booth.
Right.
There's Jason Martin for Wax. There's Mark Chouteau's Classic Auctions Auction House. There's Long-Haired Larry, which like a lot of people think he's almost like this mythical legend. He's real. You can meet him at at the convention, and I think it's family friendly. I noticed that there was really no lines for the bathrooms or food. It was pretty clean. People are happy. eBay sponsors it. There was an amazing display company. So the point is, if you're on the fence, check out the Toronto Expo. I don't remember the exact website. Is it sportscardexpo.com, or am I getting that wrong?
I think that might be it. Yeah.
Yeah. So check it out. Justin most certainly will be at the one in the fall. You kind of swayed me the other day when we were talking. I think I'm now kind of back on the fence of going on the other side of that fence.
Right.
But we're bordering on an hour here, and I promised myself, like, I'm not going to keep people for longer than that, because if I do, first of all, you're not going to be happy with me. Second of all, your wife's not going to be happy with me because I know you're working from home, right? And I want to be able to play tennis again and talk cards with you. So as we're wrapping up here, I'm going to ask you probably a sensitive question that you don't have to necessarily answer it so deeply if you don't want to. But as I'm asking you, I'd like to show off the few other items, and you'll see how the question goes together.
Okay.
So I know you have an amazing ticket. I know you have a few more choice cards that I want you to show off to the audience. But as you're doing that, do you ever contemplate what is your end game for your collection?
My end game, hopefully, is to pass them down to my kids. That's really it. I'm not some of the stuff I collect. I know I can make money off of it, but I want to buy right in case I do eventually change my mind and
Sure.
to not be in this, or if my kids don't show interest, which I think happens to a lot of people.
Sure.
But I'd love to be able to pass it down and for people in generations to come to be like, wow, we have this really awesome asset in our family. And hopefully it allows kind of my love for the game to transcend generations too. And that would be amazing if that could happen.
I tell you, man, you just gave me goosebumps. I don't think you'll be able to see him on camera because I know you really well. And I don't think I could have said it better myself as far as the plans for mine. And I haven't really thought about it. But, certainly as our respective children get older, it's not just this asset. It's a piece. It's a link to you.
Yeah.
And I recently bought a collection from this gentleman, Kevin, just outside Boston. It was the first ever vintage collection I bought with my son, meaning like we were on the deal together. We were traveling. And Kevin said at the end, after we reached a deal a few days later, that he really wanted the tin back that the tobacco cards were stored in. And he said, I want to have a connection to my grandfather. Because his grandfather gave him the cards when he was 9. So we sent him back the tin with a Boston player from the T206 set, which is really cool. But you're right, Justin. Our kids, they may not know everything we're doing, but they absolutely know that we are card nerds and we are proud and we love it.
We love it. Exactly.
So with that, let's show off the last few cards you have and take it from there.
I guess I'll show the kind of the Grail. That's
the
Grail E9.
Just roughly speaking, Justin, what's that worth these days in the open market?
Maybe 125-ish.
Yeah. Depends on the eye appeal, of course, and all that good stuff.
Plus or minus 15 to 20, I would say.
Yep. So 125,000 US. And this is what I think is amazing about collecting. I am not tone deaf to the fact that there are many people who may consume this podcast, Justin, that can never afford that. Yeah. But this is what's so cool about collecting. You could buy that card into one for, I don't know, $500, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. You can kind of go up the scale. If you want to buy a really nice, well-centered 6, it'll cost you several $1,000s, but it won't be 5 figures. And a card will be gorgeous. So to me, that's what collecting is all about. It's like finding your lane and your niche and being happy with that, right?
Well, I'll give you a plug. I'll give another plug for for people to move into hockey collecting.
Sure.
So in baseball, what is the equivalent of the Wayne Gretzky rookie in baseball? Is it the 52 Mantle? Is it, what would you say it is?
I mean, just off the top of my head, I wouldn't say it's the 52 Topps Mantle because it's just completely different time periods. So if you said to me, what would I think it is? I would say it's the Nolan Ryan rookie, right? Or like something like that.
And what does that go for in like a 9 or a 10?
In a 9, it's probably 50,000, 100,000, something like that.
All right. That's not going to help with my argument.
Yeah.
My argument is going to be like, this is literally the most expensive vintage hockey card that exists. In a 10, it is. But, I wouldn't spend that sort of money. I wouldn't be able to buy as high a quality of the best player ever in another sport. Hockey is.
No, listen, that's a great point. And maybe to further that point, Justin, I think where there's a real opportunity for folks, and I'm not knocking the Wayne Gretzky rookie, as I know you have a substantial investment in that card, and others do as well. But as soon as you take a step back, just one decade to the 60s, and then ultimately to the 50s, and forget about if we go to pre-war, which, by the way, I want to make sure you show off that Eddie Shore, because hopefully there's going to be a new sheriff in town for pre-war vintage, hockey, and that's going to be yours truly, the doctor. But joking aside, I love vintage pre-war hockey, and I feel like I can't tell you about it anymore because now we're going to be fighting each other in the hockey ring.
Well, here's maybe a better example. So there's the Bobby Hull.
Sure. Great card.
That's in a 7.
Yep.
And boy, would I love to get an 8. But so there's 7 7s with 2 higher.
Notoriously tough to find that centered.
It was the last card in the set. So for all the regular reasons, that's tough. But yeah, I mean, the baseball equivalent of a 1958 Bobby Hull, I think the price would be astronomically higher than it would for the hockey card.
And a pop would definitely be a little bit higher, showing that not only hockey cards are not produced in nearly as much quantity, but obviously also tough to find in high grade. Listen, without spending another hour trying to find the perfect example, I certainly understand what you mean. And I do feel that ultimately vintage hockey is a nice place. At the very least, if you're someone who likes to have, let's just say like a type card from each major set or sport, to me right now, I've tried not to of course steer Justin otherwise. I like vintage pre-war hockey. They didn't make a lot of it. What I personally love about the sport of hockey is that the history is very rich. It is old. It is there. It has been around almost as long as baseball, not quite as long, but almost as long. And I think that there's a lot going for it. The sport itself meaning today's sport, is immensely popular, very fun to watch live. And even though I love baseball, there's a lot of folks who would say baseball isn't as fun to watch anymore live. So,
would be one of them.
Yeah, exactly. We could have a whole conversation episode on that. There it is. I was going to buy that. The guy's name is Chris, right?
Yeah, Chris.
I was looking at that card at the Toronto Expo. Justin rolls up. He's like, "Leighton, let me show you what I got." I go, "Get the F out of here." Now I can't tell you anything anymore.
Chris Thompson, he's a great guy in the hobby, a great dealer, good friend. If you ever decide to buy hockey cards, you should you can buy with him with a lot of trust. So
great.
The last thing I was going to show, which is one of my prized possessions. So I would ask you, Leighton, what do you think is the most iconic moment in NHL history, in hockey history?
There's 2 that come to mind, but this is just like gun to my head. Number 1 is when the U.S. won the gold medal and, ultimately beat Russia.
Miracle.
Miracle on Ice. And then 2, the Bobby Orr flying puck goal, no question in my mind.
There you go. So this is the only full ticket to the game where Bobby.
That's a full?
That's a full ticket, yeah.
Oh, you're out of control. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, just beautiful.
You're going to make Darren Ravel jealous. Does he know?
Oh, he knows. Yeah, absolutely. I'll give him credit. He coached me through the buying process.
That's awesome. When you bought it, was it already graded or was it?
Yeah, it was already graded.
Good. It takes away some risk on your part, and obviously some, doubt as far as is the ticket real and all that.
Yeah,
that's fantastic, and that's the only full ticket.
It's the only full ticket. Yeah.
All right, so
the others are little stubs, like little, quarter
little nubs.
Oh my God, they're horrible.
As far as finishing up, because we're now over an hour, and like I said, I'd like to have you back at some point. So, number 1, I want you to share with folks if there's one Grail item right now you're looking for in hockey, what is it? And then number 2, if they have it or they just want to talk hockey turkey with you, how do they find you?
Okay. Crossed a huge one off the list this year, which was the 68 O-Pee-Chee Bobby Orr, which is the hardest of all Bobby Orrs to get. So this was my Grail for a very, very long time.
That's awesome.
There's only 3 9s and 5 8s.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, that's his first O-Pee-Chee card.
That's his first O-Pee-Chee card, right? So I have that. I would say, the Hull and an 8 is a big one for me. I have all the 500 goal scorers and 1,000 point scorers, and that's the only one that I have that's below an 8. So just for completeness, I would say.
All right, you've heard the announcement right here on Trading Card Therapy. Justin is looking for a Bobby Hull rookie graded PSA 8, but if I'm not mistaken, it's a Pop 2.
There are many of them.
Yeah. And by the way, most of those people who own them, probably all of them, want to keep them because they have their own collections.
Yeah.
Justin, this was a lot of fun. I know you mentioned, and I know your IG, it's stuck on Pucks, but if they're not on IG, are you comfortable to share an email where people can reach you directly?
Yeah, you can reach me at justinsilver79@gmail.com. So justinsilver79@gmail.com.
Great. Tell them Trading Card Therapy sent you.
Trading Card Therapy. I'm happy to meet anyone and get to know them, and share more about what I collect and listen to what they collect too. And by the way, I think I was wrong about the whole pop. It's 36 sevens, 7 8s, and 2 9s. Just to clarify.
So you take an 8 though.
I would take anything higher than the 7.
Higher than your 7. All right. Well, yes. I now have something to search for Justin this weekend.
Yeah, please. I'll pay a bounty to anyone that finds one. So,
all the joking aside, Justin, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it and enjoyed it thoroughly. I hope you did as well.
I did. Thanks for having me, and keep doing what you're doing, Leighton. You're a great person in the hobby and a good friend. So appreciate everything.
Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap up Trading Card Therapy, episode number 77. That's it for today's episode. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you who've taken the time out of your day to listen to the show. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff, so you'll know each and every time we drop some new content here at Trading Card Therapy on our Just Collect YouTube channel.